Well, I decided I'm going to fix this with structural rivets and epoxy resin versus going with welding, even though I got the welders and stuff. The reason being, if you sandwich this between two pieces of metal and you got, like, I'll grind all this off over here, some of it, where the epoxy resin's going to be, it'll be on both sides, and structural rivets going through here. We'll shape this metal a little bit. This will be the metal, right? So this will be the size. We'll have to put a piece here, a piece here. That's just a piece of... And with the structural rivets and the epoxy and chassis sabered on both sides, it'll be... You're not going to get water infiltration in there. That's, if you welded it, you'd have to weld both sides perfectly, cut it out where the overlap is, and no matter how perfect you try to weld it, there's going to be something that can get between there. This will actually be stronger in, but that's all anybody can do it though. So that's what we're going to be doing. So here's my first template, and I'll be drawing some lines in here with magic marker, and we're making these grooves. And we put these down with structural rivets, 1/4 inch rivets, which I'll mark them 1, 2, 3 up here, a couple up there, probably like, I don't know, maybe 8 of them or something. They'll be strong. And then we'll put another plate here, another plate here, same way. It'll be sandwiched between epoxy resin gel and structural rivets. That epoxy resin gel, when it's all squished together, there'll be like no water getting between those two plates. That's the way you want it. Then at the bottom we'll get some, I don't know, that's about a catalytic converter, so I don't know what the hell I can coat that with, man. What you coat it with. That's always another reason I was thinking about not welding it, because no matter what I try to seam up, see, there's a catalytic converter. So no matter what I try to freaking, put underneath there for, to seal up that weld, the catalytic converter is going to screw it up. So this would be the best way of doing it. Well, anyway, there you go. Well, here I just took a red magic marker, so you see these channels in here. That's where I'm going to have to dimple down the metal, make it fit, and here's a little bit of a bend we're going to have to make right here. So this will be one plate, and I'm going to have to make a plate up here, plate down here. I don't know if I got to do any more. Probably just one up here, one over here. That should suffice. I'm gonna actually put this down with epoxy gel and rivet it with structural rivets to the floor. And I'll show you how I'll do it, because what I'm gonna do is I'll put screws in it first before I put the rivets to, so that it really tightens the metal down into this, and it grinds some of this off your shiny metal. Because what I want is, I want this protected with the chassis saver, and if you weld it, that's going to burn off all the chassis saver, so you don't need that, and then it'll rust, right? So better off doing it this way, especially with a sandwich of epoxy gel between this. That'll take this, and it's kind of rough anyway, it'll really stick to the other piece really good. Okay, so I just put the cardboard over there, just painted it. Well, it's going to be straight line, just imaginary straight line. That'll be my cut. Once I make that cut, I'll start hammering out the bends, clean it off, put the chassis saver on it, let it dry, and we'll be ready to epoxy that sucker in place. Well, okay, so we got a steel plate in here, fitted in here pretty well, and it'll sit really flat when I put some screws in it. And what's going to happen now, first off, you see these red lines? I marked the red lines where these channels are, and I took it over to the vise. I opened up the jaws on the vise and hit it with a ball peen hammer right where these red lines, so it fits, semi-decent in those channels. So now the next step is to grind it down, chemically clean it, roughen it up with a grinder, chemically clean it, coat the whole thing with chassis saver. Then after I'm done, I'm going to grind a lot of the chassis saver off, not all of it, and grind, a good part of the chassis saver off over here. and not all of it though, and apply epoxy resin gel, and then this will be sandwiched down between the the epoxy resin gel will be in between here, make like a sandwich, and I'm going to use regular sheet metal screws to screw this down. Now the only reason I'm going to use sheet metal screws initially is to pull this down nice and tight. After the epoxy resin hardens, we'll drill out the sheet metal screws and we're going to put structural rivets in there. See, I want to make sure it's pulled down nice and tight and hammered around and all that kind of crap. There's going to be structural rivets. Then we got a little plate here. We got to do a little plate up there, and that'll take care of the floor basically. I think it's going to be more rust proof than welding, because if I welded it, first off, there's going to be 2 layers, even though the one layer is weak. They're going to be sandwiched in between epoxy that's going to be chemically clean, and it's going to be a rough surface, and they're going to be riveted together. So it's going to be impenetrable to moisture getting between the plates. If I weld it, I'm going to have to weld on the bottom, and I'm still going to have to find a way to seal the welds. And I always found out sealing the welds is not perfect. This would be, actually, even though a body shop would say, yeah, whatever, fuck you, shit's going to work. Next step, to fix this hole, and a little surface rust up in here. I don't know how much surface, I think it's surface rust. I'll chassis saver up in here. This crap. Maybe that's a little more. It's not. That's surface rust. I'll chassis saver that whole thing. Fix this hole with a plate, and then, well, that's it. Then we got to do this one, this one, this one here, the one in the way back, and the bottom of the door. So, one step at a time, man. But this is not a bad method, so you don't need a welder. But I'd recommend those structural rivets because they reach pretty far down. And man, they are strong as crap. They're stronger than spot welds by far. And they pull the metal tight. Plus, you can't spot weld with epoxy together. So I can use structural welds and epoxy resin. That combined is strong as crap, especially with chassis saver on top of this whole thing. And then, after it's all, dried up, it's got chassis saver on the top, structural rivets. It's going to get chassis savered all around here to seal it after the other plates are in. And then professional rubberized undercoating. Yeah, they ain't going to ever rust in freaking 100 years. Well, here's another great trick. This is rust reformer. You notice the little nozzle I have on here? It's like pointed up, which you can turn it around and point it down too, or point it sideways. You see this hole up in here? So we're going to get it way up in there. And we can turn it around on the side. Alright. Get it down in here. So you can't get that like that with regular nozzle. You'd only be spraying straight. Now if I want to go straight down in here, see that? It really gets it, man. And of course, pull the nozzle off. You got a regular, it's like a stream, because it's like, I made a hole bigger. So that's rust reformer. So after that, I can give it a coat of enamel, but I'm not going to because it's gonna it's going to get some weld on there and shit. But that's just to get it way down in there. But you can get up. That's the point with that nozzle. And what I had to do was drill out the end so this little piece, plastic nozzle, fits in there. You can see I got some on my hands, which comes off its starting fluid. And I just kind of bent it and crimped it. It's just a regular wand off a freaking WD-40 can. So I can get way up in here, like this way. That way, to the side, to this way, and down. So, that works, man. Works out pretty good. And again, this shit is called, this stuff is called Rust Reformer. Instantly converts rust to a protective, paintable surface. In other words, it chemically converts rust and stops it. So then when you put enamel over that, you're gonna, it's gonna be pretty good. But I gotta grind some of that off and put the welded steel in there, which you're also gonna have some weld through primer, copper weld through primer. But this is a good trick, using that cane with that little wand with that bend on it, and getting all these crazy places. That's how I got inside the frame and inside a lot of stuff. So you want to get inside. That's where the rust starts. Okay, so I put chassis saver on its plate last night, and of course it's going to slip here. There it goes. I did it this way because this side will be the top, and if that had to peel off, or it didn't peel off actually, but some of the wood peeled off. So like the bottom is all covered. But what I'm still going to do, I'm going to take that grinder and I'm going to kind of grind, not all of this off, but some of it, some spots where the metal is really good, and it's going to be ground partly on that floor just to roughen it up. Then we're going to coat the hell out of this with epoxy resin gel, and also the floor. Screw it down, drill out the screws, put structural rivets in it. Then we'll go on to the other two plates, and that'll be the floor. So that'll be solid as shit too. Oh, this is how much epoxy gel resin I used on this damn thing. For steel or fiberglass. It's not tiger hairs or what do you call that crap, Bondo glass or Dora glass. It's just a resin. You don't want that crap with the talcum powder stuff in there, because it's not as waterproof. So get here, you see the floors in here. It's got like the little channels, sort of like what it had, which to give it more strength. It's just screwed down. I use these little screws. Yeah, and I'm gonna let it dry, and then got a little hole here. I'm not even sure if there's a hole. Well, there's a little bit of a hole here. I could probably fill that in with some of that. What do you call that crap again? The panel adhesive. Instead of putting a plate over it, just Dremel it down, clean it up good. Panel adhesive. I'll put more of this crap all around here, the edge, after I put the rivets in, and that'll be it. Now somebody's going to say that's just screwed up, but I'm going to tell you again, I think this is a better method than screwing around with welding for a floor, unless you're going to change the whole floor out, than you do the normal way. But if you're just putting a patch panel in, I like using the rivets and epoxy gel, because I did not grind off all the chassis saver when I did the epoxy gel. Just kind of roughened it up. It's enough. I made sure it's chemically clean. It's rough enough for it to stick, and with rivets sandwiching it together, it's not going to go anywhere, man. I don't see how water is not going to get screw this up. So let's just call that a simpler way. Now, if you're doing it on the outside of the car, you're definitely not going to use fucking rivets and shit and stuff like this. But then you're going to weld in something and use a flange. But for the floor, I think this is actually a stronger way, because you still got some metal under there that gives it strength. And if you're having The old metal, it's all freaking epoxy coated with chassis saver. It's got epoxy gel between the two slices of metal and rivets. It's stronger than the original, man. It ain't going nowhere, man. And I still got the little bends in here, and this is coated with, you know, stuff you're not going to wear off. You're not going to wear off this chassis saver. And we're gonna seal all around here, but I'm going to seal it with the epoxy resin. So that's a wrap for now. I got to wait till I'll show you what my structural rivet gun looks like. This here's my structural rivet gun. It opens up real wide like that, okay, and then you squeeze it together, and you got these little rivets. Not little, they're big. These guys. And as you squeeze the handles together, it pulls this out and it makes a mushroom on the other side. And this is like, these aren't pop rivets, these are structural rivets. It ain't going nowhere, man. So that'll be going into the good metal, plus the epoxy. Then we'll seal it all around here with epoxy gel. And we'll give it a coat of, after it's all done, even that's sealed, I'll give it the coat of this crap. Corrosion resistant, professional grade, rubberized under coating, just so it, I don't think it's gonna ever, I think it's gonna last longer than the original. Original just had some paint. So chassis saver with epoxy and undercoating, and holy shit, you know what I mean? It ain't going nowhere. So you can say it's wrong, but this ain't no body shop, and it's not even a hack and pack. I mean, really, I do shit wrong that lasts longer than the original by far. Is that wrong, really? It's wrong technically by the book. You know? It's not. That's why I get pissed off at some people telling me that's Mickey Mouse shit. It's actually stronger than the original and more rust-proof than the original. And it's a lot easier to do than fucking around with a welder, making a flange, or pulling out the whole floor. So, and what the hell's this car worth anyway, for crying out loud? What are you going to do, spend $8 million on this car? For what, have a $4,000 car? What, are you crazy? I ain't doing that. I use the shit out of it. That's what I do. I use this thing. It's mainly for it being used as a truck. So there you go. Oh, again, we're doing it the Confederate way, which is redneck, but redneck right, which means stronger than the original, more metal, and whatever the hell it is, rivets and epoxy and all this other shit, chassis saver.